Hello YouTube and welcome back to the nation of free to play. I'm Mr. Mondstadt and today I have another Spiral Abyss video for you. The new Abyss for the second half version Luna 5 just came out, and in this video I will go over the enemies mechanics, the best teams to play, and give you my F2P strategy with all tips and tricks to help you in getting 36 stars. Let's go! Alright, first let's have a look at the enemy lineup. In the first chamber we have to fight one mech from Fontaine, followed by the Perpetual Mechanical Array, aka the PMA. I feel like this boss must be the most featured one in Genshin's endgame formats by now. In the second half we fight one F2P Wind Operative in the first wave and then the Radiant Moonfly. This one is not particularly hard but super annoying with its debuff mechanics, but we'll get to that. In 12-2 we have another boss who runs for the most featured award, the Mountain King. I don't know, but it feels like this one is in every other Abyss reset by now, but at least it's better than the last lineup with all the Lunar shills, so I'm not complaining. On the other side we have another F2P operative, but this time the Nordcry version, followed by a new enemy, Granny Hiljetta. This elderly lady is a local legend from Nordcry and can hit pretty hard. And lastly, in 12-3 we have another beast waiting for us in the first half, the battle-hardened glacial wolf. As you might be able to tell by its name, this wolf is the local legend version that you can fight in Nordcry, so not super easy. And in the final chamber we have the Escoffier/Skirk shill boss, the Secret Source Automaton Overseer device. This one is also in the current Stygian Onslaught, but the Abyss version is less complicated compared to the Fearless variation. Anyway, Freeze is ideal against this one. What are the blessings? First sight, on-field animal damage is increased by 75%, and second sight, normal cryo attacks are increased by 75%. This is made for Vaka and Skirk, even though the Vaka buff only makes a little sense since most of his damage is actually not an emo, but the infused element. Anyway, these buffs are rather limiting, but the enemy lineup looks definitely easier than the last Abyss, and since neither side is Lunar shill, most players will probably feel slightly relieved, at least for now. With that being said, who should you play? If you have some of the featured units like Vaka, Skirk or Escoffier, go ahead and use them, as you should have a rather easy time with them. Venti, Ayaka or Wriothesley should also be able to benefit from the Abyss blessings, and if you want to use them with some strong supports, you can. Still, none of these characters is a requirement. Generally, I would advise you to bring some strong Pyro units for the first side with the Mountain King and the Wolf. Some form of Anemo for swirling Pyro is also recommended for the Wolf in order to stun it quickly and defeat it without too much of a hassle. If you don't have Mavuika, Arlecchino or Doran, you could also run a strong Electro DPS like Veressa. And again, since the enemies on the first side are pretty straightforward, you could also run Flints or Zebai with Columbina or Inefa. Nefer will have some issues with Mountain King due to its high Dendro res, so that would depend on your personal investment level. Overall, the first side is designed so that Vaka can shine, which means that most damage dealers should feel pretty good here. For the second half, all three enemies have some form of mechanic that favors freeze. While you don't necessarily need Skirk and Escoffier, Cryo is basically a must, at least for the Overseer device. Your damage does not need to come from the cryo element, but you want enough application so that the device will not increase its resistances. Layla is, as far as I know, the only 4-star cryo character who has enough cryo app to deal with this on her own. Aside from that, Pyro is not really recommended in this chamber because of the Radiant Moonfly, which has 70% resistance against Pyro and Dendro. Again, a healer is recommended both for the Radiant Beast as well as a local legend Granny, as she can hit pretty hard. The first two bosses should also be fine to clear without cryo in your party though, so Veressa, Flints or Zebai should all be good options to deal with 12-1 and 12-2, but for 12-3 you could then switch teams if you need to. One F2P option would be Hyper Fridge, so basically Hyper Bloom with off-field cryo to deal with the device's mechanics. With the general advice out of the way, let's have a closer look at every individual chamber. 12-1-1. The Fontaine Mech is the first stalling boss, but you don't have to know much about this one, simply kill it as fast as you can and wait for the PMA to spawn. This one is the same as always, everything except physical damage works just fine. Make sure to follow its attack patterns and know when it flies up in the air. You don't want to waste a weaker burst during the time, as it will dodge your attack. Aside from that, hit it, and once you've depleted enough of its HP bar, it will split into 4 rune sentinels. The one with the yellow ring is the one you need to target, and after that sentinel is dealt with, the PMA will take damage again, and you should be able to finish it during this downtime. Since I feel like I talk about the PMA every other week, I will keep this one short. 12-1-2. The F2P Wind Operative is not too tanky either. It does have slightly higher animal resistance, but all other elements work as usual. Again, just get rid of it and wait for the actual boss to spawn. In this case, it is the Radiant Moonfly. This giant moth has 70% resistance against Dendro and Pyro, which is why I would not really recommend Pyro carries or Nefer against this boss. Other elements should have an easier time. The boss will also put a debuff on your team by performing its Radiant Cocoon attack. You will lose some HP and have the Cocoon effect on you, or should I say Cocoon Curse. This effect will decrease your crit rate by 100%, which means you will not crit any hit. And also your damage bonus is decreased by 50%, plus your incoming healing is decreased by 40%. Also, the boss will get its wings in that state. It will perform more powerful attacks. So how do you deal with this Moonfly then? Well, you have 2 options. Option 1 is to ignore basically all of its mechanics and simply brute force it with a strong meta team. Again, Pyro and Dendro is not advisable, but if you have a top tier damage dealer like Flins or Zebai, you should be able to defeat the beast even if you don't crit. However, this requires good builds and might not be the best approach for every account. Which brings us to option 2. You bring a strong healer. Once the Cocoon Curse is on you, the only way to get rid of it is to heal your entire party to 100% HP. However, as I've said before, your incoming healing is decreased by 40%, so you would need a strong, and ideally party-wide healer. Prototype Amber or Bennett is not enough for that. Your best options are probably a Scoffier or Charlotte as a more than decent 4-star option. If you don't want to play Skirk, you can also go for other elements than Cryo or Hydra, of course. And one more thing, if you play for Rena, I would advise you to switch to her healing mode while you try to get rid of the Cocoon Curse, otherwise you would have to out-heal her HP drain as well. Once you've managed to heal up your entire party, not only will the Cocoon debuff be removed, but on top of that, your crit rate will be increased by 15% and your damage bonus even by 50%. So while the healing might take some time, you should be able to make up for it with these extra stats. Whether you go for option 1 or 2 is up to you and which units you have available. 12-1. In the second chamber we have another boss who seems to be living in floor 12 by now, the Mountain King. For those of you who experienced this blobby for the first time in Abyss, he has 70% res against Dendro and will spit out 3 balls. Apply Pyro to all of the balls and he will take damage and be stunned for a short while. Also, the Saurian will perform spinning attacks from the center of the arena to the edge of the arena and back again, so be aware of that and don't place your Bennett circle when he is about to move away from you. That's all you need to know, so there you go. 12-2. On the other side, we finally have a new boss. While the F2P Nordcry unit is not more than another stalling bot, let's talk about the local legend Granny Hiljetta. This treasure hoarder lady hits pretty hard and is quite tanky. Luckily, that's all that you really need to be aware of though. You don't need lunar reactions, you don't need Ascent Gleam, no shield mechanics, which means as long as you don't die and deal enough damage, we have a fair fight. She does have this mechanic where she puts on her armor though. In order to stop her from equipping her 2 gauntlets and her jetpack, you would either need to freeze her or use the overloaded reaction. Unless you want to switch parties during your Abyss run, freeze is probably the way to go. Should you fail and Hiljetta does end up wearing her armor, her attacks are enhanced by a significant amount. If you're struggling to stay alive, bring a shielder or healer since you need one for 12-1-1 anyway, and of course, you can also brute force her with a strong DPS like Veressa, Mavuika, Flynn, Sneffer or Zebai, but the other chambers are more restrictive in terms of elemental checks or resistances, so keep that in mind when choosing your teams. 12-3-1. In the last chamber we face a local legend Glacial Wolf from Nordcry. Just as the overworld version of this beast, it will summon an ancestral wolf spirit next to itself at the start of the fight. This spirit has a cryo ward and you now need to break that ward. You do so by using either Pyro or Electro Swirl, so if you have Venti on your account, he's probably the fastest with his burst hits and the correct elemental infusion. Varka will also work well with his normal attacks, but if you don't have either, any form of swirl should do. Sucrose, Kazuha or Lanyan are some other options that you could try. If you fail to break the ward, the spirit will attack you with cryo attacks on top of the actual wolf's attacks. If you do break it though, the boss will be stunned, lying on the floor, and you can deal as much damage as possible for roughly 15 seconds before it gets back up again. I feel like this boss was also made for Varka to shine, but other than Mandragora from the current Stygian Onslaught, you don't need a grouper for this one, so as long as you have some Pyro and or Electro damage with some form of swirl, this wolf should not be too big of a challenge. And lastly, 12-3-2. Since Escoffier and Skirt are both on banner during the second half of version Luna 5, there's no way we get an Abyss or Stygian without one of our favorite bosses, the Secret Source Automaton Overseer device. If you've been trying to clear the Fearless difficulty in Stygian against this boss, you know that this is rather easy with Skirk and Escoffier, but pretty dang hard without them. While the Abyss version is not quite as difficult, the mechanics are more or less the same. The device will enter Sweeper mode and fires 2 water beams at you. In this mode, it will have this circle indicator that shows the amount of flow momentum. It starts with 32 points and the max it can reach is 135. Your goal is to reduce that amount ideally to 0. However, every second the automaton gains 2 flow momentum, and the more it gains, the faster and harder the hydro beams are hitting you. On top of that, the boss's resistance is increased to 210% against every element, so even with a lot of rest red, you will not deal enough damage. So, how do you reduce the flow momentum? Well, you need cryo attacks. Every time you hit the enemy with cryo, it will lose 4 flow momentum points, and once it has below 10 points, the water beams will stop and its res is decreased by 210% against all elements and even 250% against cryo. This is the normal way to deal with this boss, so to speak. The other way involves the automaton's Counter-Strike mode. During Sweeper mode, the boss will also accumulate adaptive countermeasures, and parts of its body are glowing in white to indicate progress. The max of the points is 180 and they are bound to Night Soul characters. Every time a unit enters the Night Soul Blessing state, the boss will gain 30 points and then 10 for every second in this Night Soul Blessing state. Once the cap of 180 is reached, the boss will enter Counter-Strike mode. And here, its res will go down from 210 to 50%, but it will attack you with water pillar attacks that will follow your active character around and hit pretty hard. If you're going for this option, you would not need quite as much cryo application and Natlan units instead, but you would have to dodge the water pillar attacks, otherwise your units will simply die. The good thing about the current Stygian is that there are a lot of videos on YouTube on how to deal with the Overseer device, and if a team could deal with it in Fearless, it can definitely deal with it in Abyss. So if you need more inspiration, go look it up and see what might be doable for your account. As a general advice, some good forsters are Layla with enough ER to burst a rotation, Charlotte, Kaya, Diona or Rosaria. The only forster who has enough cryo app on their own is Layla though. Of course, a burst support Ganyu or Ayaka can also work well. Just be aware that your damage does not have to be cryo as long as you have enough cryo application. So you could also run Mavuika or Arlecchino as a melt DPS. Again, should you run Mavuika or Siglali though, be aware of the boss's Counter-Strike mode and watch out for its attacks. Another approach would be a Hyper Fridge team, so Hyper Bloom with enough cryo app. In that case you probably need Layla though. Also, sacrificial weapons might make the difference here if you are close in terms of cryo app. If you can use your skill twice, that might make or break your run. Varka can also deal with this boss in double cryo teams, but realistically speaking, you probably want to play him on the first side if you have it. Anyway, probably the most annoying and most chill fight in this version of Spiral Abyss, but considering where we're coming from, I'll take that. And with that, I am done for the day. Again, for the current chill standard of the game, this update of Abyss is definitely on the more doable and easier side. The first side is rather easy, probably also because Varka is just not that strong yet, so good for F2P players. The second side wants cryo, ideally Skirk or Scaffier, but there are ways around the bosses without them as well. Anyway, I hope this video helps you in getting 36 stars in your account, and if you enjoyed watching this guide, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel, as it really helps me out a lot in creating more content like this, and I really appreciate your support. Also, if you have any more questions or thoughts about this Abyss lineup, leave a comment down below and I'll try to answer as many as possible. With that being said, thanks again for watching and I will see you in the next video. Bye!